Scunthorpe Amateur Speedway Meeting, Saturday 31st of January 2008. Amateur meeting number 16, no less. I'm going to tell you how it's going to be. You're going to give your love to me. I'm going to love you night and day. You know my loving not fade away. It's been a long time since I've been there. Been a long time since I've seen some life speedway, in fact. Life gets in the way, other things to do. Got to get a job, earn some money. We all got to live, and some things got to give. And that something was speedway. But there comes a time when you have to reconnect to the things that make you tick, the things that make life worth living. I was going to go there last Sunday, but the day was over before it started, as I read that it was off. So I decided I would go to the amateur meeting instead, see how some old faces were doing, and to see how the young riders were coming along. It's been a long time since I've been shaking, but it was time for some rock and roll. The sun was shining, it was almost warm, but even so it couldn't vanish from the thought those cold raw-boned days of old that I have told you about before. So I put one pullover on, then another, and wrapped myself in my old coat that I keep because it's the only thing I have that can guard against ice-cold winds blowing up your back on a day at the races. But I hadn't been there for so long, I'd almost forgotten the words of the song. I didn't even know if I would be able to wave a red flag, as I once did. Not only that, perhaps there were a lot of people there who'd never heard of little old me. Perhaps they would be affronted when this strange old man arrived on the scene, demanding a position on the third bend. "Who are you?" they would all cry, "thinking you can come here and take over this sacred piece of turf just like that, without a buy your leave or a kiss my arse?" So, with discretion being the better part of valour, I thought I'd best inform Richard of the second coming, in case my help wasn't needed. I sent an email to him advising him of my imminent arrival, and did he need any assistance with anything. I was knocked sideways when in among his reply were the words, "It will be great to see you on Saturday, and I'm sure there will be a lot of people pleased to see you too. It certainly isn't the same without you." Now those lines brought a lump to the throat, and it hit home how much I had missed those Saturday and Sunday meetings I used to go to the year before. But life makes other demands, and if we want to or not, we have to obey those commands. But all the same, I decided I was going there this week, come what may, rain or shine, cold wind blow, and frozen to the bone. But the sun was shining this morning, and it was almost warm. I was off on the familiar route, riding down the road along the familiar tarmac of those motorways that take me from one door to the other. All the way to the roundabout, turn right into the Eddie Wright Raceway, underneath the arches into the car park, pull up, slip on the boots and overcoat, button it up tight around the face, cap down low. I wondered if I would know anyone at all. I wondered if anyone would recognise me. It had been so long, faces change. I thought they may all be strangers to me, and we haven't yet mentioned the barbarians at the gate. There was already a lot of people there, overflowing into the car park, as the pits area was already filled with vans unloading their gear and setting up waiting to get out onto the track. I was already looking for Richard, who was round by the old cafe. I made my way round there, reminiscing about sausage sandwiches and Newcastle Speedway's practice day, long lost now in time immemorial, and other rock and roll cliches. I could see by the smile on Richard's face that it was almost as if the prodigal son had returned to the fold. There wasn't a fatted calf, but there were some fatty sausages in a bread roll for sale. Armed to the teeth with food and coffee, we walked round to the pits, we being a new volunteer who had arrived to assist for an hour or two. One who seemed to think that he was attaching himself to someone who knew what they were doing. He was concerned as just to what he should do when he waved the red flag. I told him, "Just wave the red flag if you think it's the right thing to do. If you mess up, argue the toss after the fact. At the end of the day, you have to make the decision for the riders on the track, not the person in the referee's box. But we were looking for old faces, and we found one in Steve Dixon, and along came Jim Blanchard. Great to see the two old duffers armed with their cameras. They had come along to take their pictures of the action to commemorate the actions of the riders on the track. I also got reacquainted with Pudding, warming his bike up around the back out of sight, obviously plotting the downfall of the opposition, whoever they were likely to be. Spoke with Mr. Franklin, enquired about Richard. I forgot he'd signed for Scunthorpe. I thought he was still with Rye House, but Mr. Franklin put me wise about that. Shows you out of touch, you'll be coming only a season. I wish him well in the season up and coming, but time was going by, and it was time to state my claim to bend number 3. There wasn't any opposition to fight off, and we still haven't mentioned the barbarians at the gate. I got myself a programme, looked through all the names to see who was there, who I knew, and making a note to observe how they progressed since I'd seen them 10 months ago. Then another old man came walking by, a man with an extended ponytail. This ponytail is not to be confused with the other one, the one with the shorter ponytail, but a little bit more sophisticated, with an immaculate coiffure. The man with the longer ponytail looked me in the eye, and it was obvious he knew who I was, but he couldn't recall the name. It was little old me, Mr. Clemens, of course. Then he remembered, and we chatted for a few moments. But it was racing time, and already riders were coming out on the track that looked like a little rough to my eyes, but I'd seen it worse in the past. So we'd see how it goes and look forward to the great day of racing. But the marker was already down when Ricky Mullins didn't get past the first bend, as he lost control of the bike and ended up in the fence. It was obvious the ambulance was needed, and it made its way out onto the track. Already a cold wind was blowing, but after a while the ambulance left the track. I don't know what happened with Ricky after that, or what condition he was in, but I wish him well, as it was a long way to come from Kent to ride 100 feet and end the day before it even started. We carry on though, for even as the ambulance was leaving the track, the next crew of riders were lining up to take their chances on the track. This was also my first chance to see Richard Franklin in action, and he came in second this time around, but I think it was that the riders were feeling their way around the track. I'd even noticed there was an air fence up now, which wasn't there the last time I was at a practice amateur meeting. It was obvious great changes were taking place at Scunthorpe Speedway. They are getting ready for a new season, getting ready for stock cars to plough their way around the track. The management diversifying to try and keep afloat in these trying times and credit crunch moments, and I still ain't mentioned the barbarians at the gates. But I got to thinking about the way things are, as you do when you are stood on the third bend of a speedway track with the cold wind already beginning to blow, and all the time slipping in the mud trying to keep stood up. I got to thinking about how I was surrounded by old men. I saw people with tired looks on their faces, people who were taking the strain, and I began to try and explain these things to myself. And I looked around and I saw the strain on the faces of all who were there. All the people seemed to me to be staring at a high brick wall in the face, wondering how it was that they were going to get over it. These people reminded me of King Nut, who was told by his advisers he was as powerful as any god. To disabuse them of this idea, he went to the seashore and ordered the waves to retreat. And I still ain't mentioned those barbarians at the gate. This was the scene that presented itself to me today. All these people, young and old, with a look of world-weary on their faces, all of them trying bravely to keep things going. All the time the ground under their feet is turning to sand and drifting through the hourglass. But all these things come to pass and times change with Speedway at the bottom of the sporting food chain, a sport that has to fight all the time to keep itself alive, and the fight gets harder all the time. And I could see the strain on all the faces today as I stood in the cold and waved that red flag. You could see them all with their shoulders to the wall, trying to push it over, trying to blast a way through it, even trying to order the waves of change to roll back so they could get on with their lives in the way they wanted to do. And none of them even knew about the barbarians at the gate, who lie in wait to tear down all these empires we try to build, to put a smile on people's faces and give young people a chance to turn themselves into racers. You could see as you looked around things were in disarray. Where things half built or things half torn down, it was hard to tell from this distance of having not been there for so long. It was a bit like Rome in the Empire days, when they had reigned supreme for so long, building things up. The desire to build something solid, something that would last forever, but already it seems the barbarians are at the gates. So the question is, should we carry on or pack up and be gone? That's the thought that passes through their minds. Yes, everyone seemed a little older than they had done before, even the youngest riders. Old and young know there is something afoot, and all of them are trying to hold on to what they've got, trying to hold on to those grains of sand that they can feel are slipping away from them, even as they hold them tightly in their hands. But it was time for more racing, and Sergeant Major was out on the track. It would be interesting to see how he developed since I last saw him, along with the new faces I had seen at all before. Second place this time around, but they were all feeling their way around the track the first time out. But at least the sun was shining, and things were bound to get better as the day rolled along. The racers were rolling round by now, and eventually we arrived at Heat 9. It was pointed out to me to look out for Kyle Abbott, who I was told had just started riding Speedway in August this year. It was obvious right away the lad knew what he was doing and was in full control of the bike. I don't know what happened as he came round the fourth bend. I think it was that his engine stopped, but the bike was still rolling. Then Kyle actually flipped himself off the bike, very much in the way a cowboy of the Old West jumped off a moving horse as they throw themselves from one side of the horse to the other at full gallop. I was trying to wonder why he was doing that, even as he was still flying through the air. Apparently it was because he was trying to keep himself from being lapped, but it was spectacular to see the rider actually running faster than the bike that was still rolling at a fair old speed. It was worth coming to Scunthorpe to see that alone, and it's fair to say the lad has a good future in the sport if he can just bring himself to stop doing things like that. But enthusiasm is enthusiasm, and when you've got that, you don't even notice the barbarians at the gate. And so it rolls on, but in the heat before, that's Heat 8, that is Pudding came in second place, a good start to the day. And there was little Reese, powering around the track in harness with his partners for the day, and Richard Franklin getting a win, looking good. What I like about Richard is that there's an air around him that says, I mean it, and what that means is that he himself is dedicated to the sport and is going to be a Speedway rider come what may, and puts his two fingers up to the barbarians at the gate. The meeting rolled on, and one or two of the riders rolled off their bikes, out of control and into the fence. I was looking for their red lights that weren't coming on when they should have done, and I was thinking they ought to be a bit sharper on that button, but as I recall we weren't supposed to wave the flags till the lights came on. But second time it happened, there was Richard waving his hands for the race to stop, and me putting out the red flag. People were calling from the sidelines to put out the flag, and I decided then that it was necessary that I would, without waiting for the red lights to come on, wave that flag. We have spoken of these things before, but safety is everything, and we make no apology for it. And along came Heat 19, and the Pudding was out in front, chased all the way by James Culbert, but he held him off to come in first, and we bow to the mightiness of it all. But the celebrations were such that he pulled a muscle, and we never saw him out on the track again, but he lives to fight another day. and I hope I'm around to see him win another race. In Heat 20, Kyle Aleth was lapping it up, but not having the need this time to outrun his own bike, and so was Richard Franklin in Heat 24, showing the Sergeant Major the way around. It was all settling down into a good run of races going by. Time was ticking by, and there was still a long way to go with 44 more races to compete, but everybody was getting into it. The track was awkward in places, but people were mastering the obstacles, as you have to do if you want to be regarded as a speedway rider. There are so many names riding in this type of meeting, too many names to mention, and Richard will surely post all the race results and who finished where. But you have to point out those who are there to do well and impress those who are watching them. There are people of all ages trying their luck out on the track. Someone getting on in years who decided there was no reason why they couldn't live their dream, even if they could never live the dream. But the dream has to come to an end somewhere, and so it did in Heat 35, as we entered into the second half of the scheduled races. I was contemplating how long this meeting would go on before it was over. Already it was growing very cold. The sun that was shining earlier had already disappeared down the back of the grandstand. The wind was getting up, and I was beginning to shiver, so much so I decided it was time to go for a cup of coffee and a sandwich. The reason I could do this was because there had been another fall on the first bend. Stuart Parnaby had reared and fallen coming out of the first bend. You could tell right away the ambulance was needed. Concerned people were dashing across the track to get to his assistance as soon as they could. So I went and got my sandwich. But while I was away, decisions were being made. Decisions that were saying perhaps it was time to call it a day, as the track was cutting up rough on that bend. All those soldiers who had come to ride the track trooped out together to inspect the surface and to decide if it was wise to proceed, and it was decided it was time to call it a day. It was the right decision. It was always the right decision if you know in your heart you shouldn't be out there. So it was time for everyone to pack up and go. I thought at least I was going to get home at a decent time, and I was secretly glad that they called a halt to it, as I was freezing already, and there were 33 more heats to go. Jim Blanchard was saying to me about how there was a thread on the British Speedway forum about the coldest meeting people had ever attended. They'd never done the third bend at Scunny on a cold bone row frozen to the sole day, as we old soldiers had done. And it was all over. Just like that, everyone was packing up and getting on their way. It was then I ran into that other mainstay of Scunthorpe Speedway, Mr. Kenny Smith, he of the shorter yet more sophisticated ponytail. He didn't know me for a second, but that was forgivable, as he had concerns about Mr. Parnaby on his mind. Then he realised who it was, and we had a short conversation before he had to move on to deal with pressing matters. But it was good to see him, as it always is. I hope he's not forgotten about the Veterans Speedway meetings. I hung around for a while, and I watched all those people leaving for their homes, and all the time I was thinking about how old everyone was looking, how old, careworn and weary everyone seemed to be. And I was thinking too about the barbarians at the gates, those waiting in the shadows to plunder Rome as she lay exposed to the Vandals. But who were they, and where are they from? And people might even think about those travellers who were soon going to be parked next to the track. But no, it's not them. They're not the barbarians at the gate. No, it's not them at all. Governmental edicts are handed down by the masters, who make the rules for the wise men and the fools, and they seek to equalise everything to make everything fair, that one is not favoured over the other, that it is seen that the ladder of the law has no top and no bottom, that all is fair and the courts are on the level. You who philosophise despair and criticise all fears, bury the rag most deep in your face, for now is the time for your tears. And as such they say that there will be no place made for travellers, if it is the right thing to do or not, as right has nothing to do with it, but taking away everything that has everything to do with it, taking away the right to do this or that to the other, reshape everyone and anything in the nation to make them all conform to some ideal they don't know about, they don't see, and they are not a party or a contributor to. And taking away the right to run a speedway business is all a part of this progress to some sort of ideal fulfillment for us all as one people, all heading in one direction, some unknown goal that they call perfection. You see, when you fight against an unknown ghost, these barbarians at the gate, there is a certain look on the faces of those older people who may have seen battles in life, but I saw that the real world weariness on some of those faces today, people who seem to be drained of energy, a realization perhaps they were fighting some sort of losing battle, that they did not quite understand what it was, but they knew it was there, and they knew they had to fight for survival on their hands. And you could see also that this sense of all these things are being passed on to the younger people there, those who are gathered there to make their mark in the speedway world, a world that seems in danger, that they could not perceive these unknown barbarians at the gate. There was that air of melancholy about the place today, but we have been watching these vandals at work for so long, now we see their hard work all the time. But it was time to go, to get along and ride that motorway home, time to say farewell to all those I know down there at Scunthorpe Speedway. I don't know when we will meet again, as the work calls me all the time. We don't know how long it will be before I will get to another speedway meeting, but it's always there in the blood. I wish them all well in their fight against the barbarians at the gate. Victory will be ours in the end, but we will leave that thought there, as we don't want to get into political things. And so we rolled along the highway back home, running all these thoughts through my mind. I said I might write a line or two about what went on today and post them. People said they expected it, and I am not one to disappoint. I don't know that they'd expected a post so long or themed as it is, but we can only tell what we see. All of it is opinion formed by what we experience and filter through our minds and pour out on the page. And we don't apologise for any of it, for those who enjoy them will savour this, and those who don't care won't listen to them or read them anyway. I don't know when I will breathe the speedway air again, so I'll make up for all those which won't be written.